The last ships of the Caleth people burned through dark space, carrying the remnants of an empire that once controlled 37 star systems. Now they ran for their lives, and the enemy followed close behind. Captain Thera pressed her hand against the cool crystal wall of her ship, the Star Whisper. Through it, she could feel the pain of her dying fleet. 300 years ago, they had first encountered the Devourers, creatures of pure hunger that consumed everything in their path. Planets, stars, entire solar systems just disappeared into their endless void. "Captain, the rear guard isn't going to make it," her second-in-command whispered, his voice trembling. Outside the ship's living crystal walls, they could see explosions lighting up the darkness as Caleth ships fell one by one. The Devourers weren't like any enemy they had faced before. They didn't conquer worlds. They ate them. They didn't take prisoners. They devoured souls. And worst of all, they learned from every battle, growing stronger with each victory. Thera remembered her grandmother's stories about the old days when the Caleth Empire stretched across the galaxy. Beautiful crystal cities that sang with harmony, gardens that grew in zero gravity, art that could only exist in the vast emptiness of space. All of it was gone now, feeding the insatiable hunger of the Devourers. "How many refugee ships made it through?" she asked. "Only half, maybe less. The orbital defense platforms are completely overwhelmed." Thera closed her eyes. She had been putting off this decision for weeks, hoping against hope that their military could find another way. But deep in her heart, she knew what had to be done. In the oldest archives of her people, carved into crystal tablets by their ancestors, was a legend most Caleth dismissed as fantasy. The Cry Across the Voids, they called it. A ritual so dangerous that it required the ultimate sacrifice, the life force of 12 volunteers, including the one who performed it. The ritual was said to tear through the barriers between dimensions, sending a plea for help to whoever might be listening in the vast emptiness between worlds. Most scholars believed it was impossible. Others thought it was just a myth created to give hope to those facing certain death, but myths were all they had left. "Gather the volunteers in the meditation chambers," Thara ordered. "Tell them what we're about to attempt." Her crew looked at her with wide eyes. They all knew the legend. They all understood what she was asking. "Captain, there has to be another way," someone protested. "What if nobody hears us? What if nobody comes?" Thara smiled sadly. "Then at least we'll die fighting, doing something instead of just running until we have nowhere left to run to." The volunteers gathered without hesitation, 12 of them, plus Thera herself, veterans and youngsters, scientists and warriors, representing every part of Caleth society. They held hands in a circle inside the ship's deepest chamber, surrounded by crystals that hummed with ancient power. The ritual began slowly, with each person offering their memories, their hopes, their life force to the growing energy in the center of the circle. The crystals sang louder and louder as the power built up. The ship around them groaned and shook as reality itself began to bend. "I see it," Thera gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "The barrier is thinning. I can see through to somewhere else." The space between them split open like a wound, revealing not another star system but something impossible. A glimpse into another universe entirely. Through the rift, Thara could see strange ships, alien technologies, and beings unlike anything in their reality. With her last breath, she poured their final message into the rift. "Please, anyone who can hear this, help us survive. We are dying, and we don't want to die alone." The energy explosion that followed nearly destroyed the Star Whisper. When the light faded, 13 Caleth were gone, their sacrifice complete. The rift sealed itself, leaving only a faint shimmer in space where it had been. On the ship's bridge, the surviving crew stared at the empty meditation chamber in stunned silence. Their captain was gone. The volunteers were gone. And they had no idea if anyone had heard their desperate plea. Behind them, the Devourers continued their advance, hungry shadows creeping closer to the last remaining Caleth worlds. The survivors would have to keep running, keep fighting, and hope that somehow, somewhere, their call had been answered. None of them imagined that on the other side of the rift, In a universe very different from their own, alarms were already sounding, and war councils were forming. The plea had been heard, and the answer would come with fire and thunder. But that was still 3 months away, and for now the Caleth could only flee and hope that their sacrifice hadn't been in vain. 3 months had passed since High Conduit. Thara and 12 brave volunteers gave their lives to send the cry across the voids. The Caleth had lost 4 more star systems in that time, and now huddled around their twin sun stronghold of Thymora Prime, like refugees in their own galaxy. Captain. Jahan stood on the bridge of the transport ship Moonweaver, watching hundreds of civilian vessels stream past the mining station. Every day brought more refugees as the Devourers consumed another world. Every day their hope grew thinner. Another evacuation convoy from Sector 7, his communications officer reported. They say the Devourers hit them 12 hours ago. The planet's gone. Jahan clenched his fists. He had been a combat pilot before taking command of refugee operations, but there weren't enough fighters left to make a difference anymore. Now he spent his days moving scared families from one hiding place to another, always one step ahead. "Of the consuming darkness, sir," the sensor operator called out, her voice shaking. "I'm detecting ships approaching from deep space. Vector 74 Mark II. Devourer scouts?" Jahan asked, though he already knew they weren't. The Devourers moved like living shadows, bending space around them. These contacts looked different. "Negative, sir. These are..." "I don't know what these are. The signatures don't match anything in our database." On the main screen, shapes began to emerge from the starfield. Ships, but not like any the Caleth had ever seen. Where Caleth vessels curved and flowed like living crystal, these newcomers were all angles and hard edges. They looked like they had been hammered into shape rather than grown. "Unknown vessels, this is Captain Jahan of the Caleth Defense Force," he broadcast. "State your intentions." For a moment there was only static. Then a voice came through, speaking in Caleth language, but with an accent so strange it took a moment to understand.
"Captain Jahan, this is Admiral Lee of the United Nations Fleet. We heard your call 3 months ago. Where are these Devourers you mentioned?" Jahan's legs nearly gave out under him. The ritual had worked. Someone had answered. "Admiral? Admiral."
"Lee, is it? We don't know how you got here, but we need immediate assistance. Our mining station has thousands of civilians, and the Devourer advanced scouts are less than 6 hours away." "Understood. We can handle 6-hour time frames. All human ships, this is Admiral Lee. We're green for combat operations. The aliens we came to help are under immediate threat. Let's show these Devourers what Earth sends to gatecrashers." 6 hours later, the Devourers arrived as predicted. 3 massive bioships emerged from hyperspace, their hulls rippling with living darkness. Behind them came smaller craft that moved like diseased insects. The human fleet was already waiting. Captain Jahan had moved all civilian ships behind the space station, but he stayed to watch the battle. What he saw defied everything he knew about space combat. The Caleth fought with elegant tactics, precise energy beams, careful formations, battles that looked like deadly dances between civilized opponents. The humans fought like something else entirely. Their ships charged straight at the Devourers, not in careful formation, but in a barely controlled swarm that somehow managed to avoid colliding with each other. When they fired, it wasn't with graceful energy weapons, but with solid projectiles that could punch through ship hulls. "What are they doing?" the sensor operator asked in amazement. "They're ramming distance." But the humans weren't ramming. They were getting close enough that their weapons couldn't miss. 2 of the human ships, destroyers Admiral Lee had called them, actually latched onto a Devourer bioship with mechanical claws and began tearing chunks off its hull while firing weapons at point-blank range. The battle lasted exactly 1 hour and 43 minutes. When it was over, all 3 Devourer bioships were debris, and only 2 human vessels had taken damage. Admiral Lee's ship, the Soul, pulled alongside the mining station. Through the view screen, Jahan got his first look at humanity. They were shorter than Caleth, and their bodies seemed almost fragile. But their eyes held something the Caleth had lost long ago, absolute confidence in their ability to win. Captain Jahan, Admiral Lee said during the first face-to-face meeting, "We've been monitoring your communications. We understand your people have been fighting these devourers for 300 years. That's correct, Admiral. They consumed our Empire system by system. We sent out the call hoping someone would hear us before we were all destroyed." Admiral Lee nodded. "Well, we heard you, and we brought friends." He gestured to another screen, showing more ships arriving through the dimensional rift. "The Turian fleet, the Quarian migrant marine, and a few others. We've been preparing for this fight for longer than you know." "How can you prepare for something you've never seen?" Lee smiled grimly. "Because Earth has faced its own devourers, different names, different forms, but the same hunger. The Reapers wanted to harvest us. The Borg wanted to assimilate us. The Tyranids wanted to eat us. Every few decades, something shows up wanting to end humanity. We got good at saying no." Over the following days, more ships arrived. Jahan watched in amazement as humans worked alongside alien species he didn't recognize, all united in purpose. They brought technology that seemed impossible and tactics that defied conventional wisdom. The humans shared their plans freely with the Kaleth leadership, not just for rescue operations but for something bigger, something they called a counteroffensive. "Admiral," Jahan asked during one planning session, "why are you really here? You could return to your dimension and seal the rift. You'd be safe." Lee's expression hardened. "Captain, we've learned something over the millennia. Evil that devours civilizations doesn't stay satisfied for long. Today it's your galaxy. Tomorrow it might find a way into ours. Better to stop it here, on our terms." The Kaleth had called across the void in desperation, expecting at best a few ships, a few supplies, maybe some tactical advice. Instead, they had summoned an armada that seemed ready to take on the entire Devourer collective. As rescue ships arrived to evacuate the mining station's population to safer systems, Jahan found himself feeling something he hadn't experienced in decades. Not just hope, but certainty. The war wasn't over. If anything, it was about to get much worse. But for the first time since the Devourers had appeared in their galaxy, the Kaleth weren't facing extinction alone. They had allies now. Strange, violent, impossibly stubborn allies who fought like madmen and planned like geniuses. And if the past week was any indication, the Devourers were about to learn a very hard lesson about what happened when humans made friends. In the weeks following first contact, the Kaleth homeworld saw more activity than they had in centuries. Ships arrived daily through the dimensional rift, not just human vessels, but an entire coalition of species the Kaleth had never imagined existed. Commander Park Gina of the UEF Busan found herself serving as a cultural liaison, mainly because she was one of the few humans who had bothered to learn basic Kaleth phrases during the journey. It helped that the Kaleth had rapid translation neural implants, though some concepts didn't translate well. "So you work with the Turians, the Quarians, and the... what did you call them? The Krogan?" asked researcher Velnathi, one of the Kaleth scientists studying human technology. "Among others," Gina nodded, watching as a massive Krogan battleship docked at the Crystal orbital platform. "We've learned something over the years. Diversity makes you stronger. Every species we've worked with has taught us something new about fighting, surviving, or just living. The Kaleth were fascinated by human adaptability, but it was the humans who were most eager to learn. Engineering teams from both species worked side by side, creating hybrid technologies that neither could have developed alone." Lieutenant Han, Songho was a perfect example. Originally a mechanic on the destroyer Incheon, he now spent 18 hours a day working with Kaleth crystal shapers to modify ship engines. The results were impressive. Human vessels that could achieve impossible speeds by learning to flow through space like Kaleth ships, while Kaleth vessels gained human-style shielding that could absorb energy instead of simply deflecting it. For secret, Han explained to a group of fascinated Kaleth youngsters, is thinking differently. You see crystals as living things that grow. We see machines as tools that build. But what if we combine both ideas? The demonstration that followed left everyone speechless. Han had created a hybrid engine that grew like a crystal but could be modified like a machine. It was organic and mechanical at the same time, beautiful and functional. But it wasn't just technology that was being shared. Human commanders were learning Kaleth military philosophy, which focused on harmony and precise coordination. In return, they taught the Kaleth something they'd never encountered: improvisation under pressure. Your people, Captain Yon Sul-gi observed during a joint training exercise, fight like everything depends on following the perfect plan. What happens when the plan goes wrong? High Conduit Zarakan, one of the few surviving leaders from before the war, smiled sadly. That's why we've been losing for 300 years. We plan perfectly and then the Devourers do something unexpected. Right. So let's teach you how to make it up as you go. The next training session was chaos from the Kaleth perspective. Human ships would start a maneuver, then suddenly change direction mid-flight. They'd begin firing at one target, then switch to another without warning. Orders were given and immediately modified based on battlefield conditions. This is insane, muttered pilot Kasnath after his first joint simulation. How do you coordinate anything when everyone is constantly changing? The plan? That's the point, laughed wing leader Choi Min-ae. If we can't predict what we're doing, neither can the enemy. Chaos is another weapon. The cultural exchange went beyond military tactics. Human entertainment introduced the Kaleth to concepts like comedy and sarcasm, things their refined society had little experience with. In return, Kaleth introduced humans to harmonic meditation and crystal art, creating patterns of light and sound that could induce genuine peace. Dr. Song Hae-jin, the lead xenobiologist on the expedition, spent hours studying Kaleth physiology. Your people are remarkable, she told Zarakan. You've evolved to naturally harmonize with energy fields. That's why you survived the Devourers for so long. You instinctively worked together. And your people? Zarakan asked curiously. We evolved to survive by being stubborn. When everything else dies, humans find a way to keep going. It's not pretty, but it works. The real breakthrough came when Captain Kim Do-yeon suggested combining human battlefield adaptability with Kaleth harmonic coordination. The result was a new tactical approach nobody had seen before. During the first test, human ships would charge the enemy in apparent chaos, then suddenly lock into perfect Kaleth formation at the crucial moment. The enemy would prepare for either human unpredictability or Kaleth precision, but not both simultaneously. We call it the Soul Gambit, Kim explained to the Joint Command Staff. Look like chaos until the exact moment when you become harmony. But perhaps the most important changes were personal. Young humans and Kaleth began forming friendships, sharing meals, and learning each other's languages. Human engineers would sit with Kaleth artists, trying to understand how to make functional things beautiful. Kaleth warriors trained with human Marines, learning that sometimes the crude solution was the right solution. Technician Lee Jun-ho became something of a legend among the Kaleth when he fixed their primary communication array by, in his words, hitting it with a hammer until it decided to work. The Kaleth had tried elegant repairs for weeks. Lee fixed it in 10 minutes. Your people don't think like us, observed engineer Thexanol. You see problems as things to be overcome, not puzzles to be solved. Sometimes, Lee shrugged, the best solution is the one that works right now. As the joint fleet prepared for their counteroffensive against the Devourers, both species had changed. The Kaleth had learned to adapt and improvise. The humans had learned to coordinate and harmonize. Together, they were becoming something neither species had been alone, not just survivors, but victors. Admiral Lee stood in the command center, watching streams of data from dozens of ships representing multiple species. Are you ready, High Conduit? Zarakan nodded, her crystalline features catching the light from the tactical displays. For the first time in 3 centuries, Admiral, we are not just ready. We are eager. The Devourers had consumed 30 systems, believing themselves to be the ultimate predators in a universe of prey. They were about to learn why humans had a saying, The pack that prays together stays together. The gathering storm was ready to strike. The assault on the Devourer's stronghold in the Erebus Nebula was the largest combined operation the galaxy had ever seen. 17 different battle groups attacked 17 different worlds at exactly the same moment, coordinated by human quantum computers working in harmony with Kaleth crystal processors. Commander Yoon Seo-jin watched from the bridge of the Daegu as the first wave engaged. Around them, dozens of human ships launched their opening salvo. Not the elegant energy beams the Kaleth preferred, but crude kinetic rounds that seemed almost primitive. Contact confirmed on all 17 fronts, reported the tactical officer. Devourers are responding as predicted. The response was immediate and devastating. Devourer bioships emerged from the planet's surfaces like living shadows, their hulls rippling with dark energy. Within minutes, they had adapted their defenses to stop the human projectiles completely. "They're learning too fast," Captain Lim Jae-hyun observed from the Incheon. "Our standard weapons are already useless." This was the moment every human officer had been waiting for. "All ships, this is Admiral Kim," came the fleet commander's voice. "Phase 1 is complete. The enemy has shown us their defenses. Begin Phase 2. Phase 2 was why Earth had spent decades developing weapons they hoped they'd never need to use. The Soul was the first to unveil its true arsenal. Instead of projectiles, it began firing something that looked like tiny stars, each one containing the compressed heart of a neutron star, held together by artificial gravity fields. When they hit Devourer ships, they didn't just punch holes. They created miniature black holes that consumed everything nearby. "Jesus," whispered engineer Kim Hyo-jin, watching the tactical display. "How do we even build something like that?" "Very carefully," replied weapons officer Park Min-ji. "And preferably on a planet you don't mind accidentally erasing." But the Devourers adapted even to this. Within an hour, they had developed fields that could disperse artificial gravity, turning the star bombs into harmless light shows. That's when the humans revealed why they had brought so many different ships. The Busan began firing what looked like computer viruses made solid, crystalline structures that burrowed into enemy hulls and began rewriting reality at the molecular level. Where they touched, Devourer bioships started turning into glass. The Gwangju deployed time distortion, minds that created pockets where cause and effect worked backwards. Devourer weapons would fire, and the energy would return to hit their own ships instead. "How is this possible?" asked High Conduit Theranel, watching from the Joint Command ship as human technology defied every law of physics the Kaleth knew. "Captain," Choi Sung-ho smiled grimly, "we discovered something you didn't. The universe has suggestion boxes. You just need to know how to file a complaint." The Devourers responded by escalating their own attacks. Ships made of living darkness began phasing partially out of reality, becoming immune to conventional weapons. Swarms of parasitic fighters that existed as pure energy flew through solid matter to attack from inside human ships. This was when the humans deployed their true masterpiece. The experimental vessel, Pandora, had been built in secret, using technology that human scientists still didn't fully understand. As it moved into position, space around it began to change. "What the hell is that thing?" demanded a Kaleth observer. "Something we found in a crashed ship that landed in Nevada a long time ago," replied Admiral Kim. "We've been trying to understand it for 50 years. Turns out the best way to understand alien technology is to use it against other aliens." The Pandora opened its central bay, and something that wasn't quite matter and wasn't quite energy poured out. The Devourers tried to consume it, as they consumed everything else. They couldn't. Instead, it consumed them. "It's fighting back," reported the sensor technician, his voice filled with wonder and terror. "Whatever the Devourers eat, it eats them right back." The thing from the Pandora, the humans called it the recursion engine, spread through the Devourer fleet like a cancer. The creatures that had consumed 30 star systems suddenly found themselves being consumed in return, and they had no defense against it. But the humans weren't done. The real weapons weren't the exotic ones that defied physics. The real weapons were simpler and far more terrifying. Commander Bang Haiji, a former Special Forces operator, led boarding parties onto disabled Devourer ships. Their mission was simple: plant human-made viruses directly into the enemy's biological systems. These weren't computer viruses. They were actual biological organisms, modified by human science to be the perfect anti-Devourer weapon. They targeted only the Devourer's ability to adapt, turning their greatest strength into a weakness. Within hours, Devourer ships stopped learning from human attacks. They could no longer modify themselves to resist new weapons. They were, for the first time in their existence, vulnerable. The battle raged for 3 days. Every time the Devourers seemed to find a counter to human weapons, the humans would deploy something even stranger: plasma fields that turned energy into matter, gravity weapons that made ships forget which way was up, and always the humans themselves. Boarding parties that fought with nothing but determination and old-fashioned guns, winning through sheer stubborn refusal to die. Dr. Yang Su-bin, monitoring the battle from a medical ship, watched as wounded Devourer vessels tried to regenerate. "They're learning disabled," she observed. "Our virus has stripped away their primary survival mechanism." On the flagship bridge, Admiral Kim watched as the last Devourer strongholds fell one by one. The creatures that had seemed invincible were collapsing under the weight of weapons they couldn't understand or adapt to. "This is impossible," whispered a captured Devourer consciousness, speaking through a translation matrix. "We consume. We adapt. We are eternal." "So are cockroaches," replied the Admiral. "Doesn't mean we let them run the kitchen." By the end of the 3rd day, the Erebus Nebula was clear. Not empty, clear. The darkness that had consumed 20 star systems was gone, replaced by the light of newly free stars. But the war wasn't over yet. The Devourer Queen still waited in the space between dimensions, and the humans had one more weapon to deploy. The strangest weapon of all. The final battle didn't take place in normal space. It didn't even take place in the hyperspace, dimensions the Kaleth used for travel. The Devourer Queen had retreated to the space between realities, where conventional weapons couldn't reach. Admiral Kim gathered the combined fleet commanders in the war room of the UEF battleship New Horizon. The holographic displays showed nothing but empty space where the Queen had vanished. "She's hiding in the void between dimensions," explained Dr. Park Min-jung, the expedition's lead physicist. "It's like she's standing in the cracks between walls. We can't touch her from here." "So we bring the walls down," said Commander Lee Jun-ho from the Engineering Corps. "I've been working on something. We call it the Possibility Engine." "Hi." Conduit Zarakan leaned forward, her crystalline features reflecting the blue glow of the displays. "A weapon that affects reality itself?" "Not exactly," Lee replied. "It's more like aggressive negotiation with physics. We don't destroy the Queen. We convince the universe that she was never real to begin with." The concept made even the human officers uncomfortable. Captain Song Hye-ri, who had fought in 30 different star systems, looked disturbed. "Are we talking about rewriting history? That sounds dangerous." "Everything we do is dangerous, Admiral," Kim pointed out. "That's why we do it right." The Possibility Engine was built using technology from 7 different species, including components the humans still didn't fully understand from the ancient ship that crashed on Earth decades ago. It looked less like a weapon and more like a massive art installation: crystals, quantum processors, and something that might have been alive. Commander Yoon Jae-sung, the fleet's tactical specialist, presented the attack plan. "We'll need to enter the void dimension ourselves. The engine only works at close range." "How close?" asked a Kaleth captain. "Close enough to shake hands." The volunteer list for the mission filled within hours. Human pilots and Kaleth navigators signed up in pairs, planning to link their minds through the neural interfaces developed during the war. The cultural exchange had gone so deep that many mixed crews could practically read each other's thoughts. 2 days later, 12 ships phased out of normal reality and into the void between dimensions. The journey took them through places that had no names, past things that weren't quite stars, and around space that bent at wrong angles. Captain Cho Hyun-woo, piloting the lead ship, Seoul, with Kaleth navigator Vex Thani sharing his neural space, felt his mind stretched as they approached their target. "I see her," he whispered. The Devourer Queen was vast beyond comprehension, a living shadow that existed partially in 17 different dimensions. Her hunger was so intense it created gravity wells in empty space. She had been feeding on the destroyed star systems, growing larger, becoming something that threatened not just one galaxy but the entire local reality cluster. "All ships, arm the possibility engine," Admiral Kim ordered from the command ship. "Remember, we're not trying to kill her. We're proving she never existed." The process began slowly. Reality around the Queen started to flicker, like a badly tuned hologram. The engine wasn't firing energy or matter. It was firing paradoxes, creating logical impossibilities that the universe couldn't resolve. "She was never born," Engineer Park Soo-min chanted, working the engine controls. "She never evolved. She never consumed the first star. She never met the Kaleth," added navigation. Officer Hwang In-ho. "The war never happened. The systems were never consumed." But the Queen fought back in ways they hadn't expected. Instead of attacking the ships, she attacked reality itself, trying to make the engine's paradoxes impossible. "She's smart," observed Dr. Kim Yeonju, monitoring the quantum readings. "She's trying to create her own paradoxes to cancel ours out." This became a battle not of weapons but of logic, each side trying to out-paradox the other, creating loops of causality that made professional philosophers weep. The Queen claimed she had always existed, that hunger was the natural state of the universe. The humans insisted that existence was more interesting than hunger, and therefore the universe preferred them. The stalemate broke when pilot Lee Hyun-soo and Kaleth mindsinger Thelmyrus linked their thoughts completely, achieving a perfect harmony between human determination and Kaleth cosmic awareness. Together, they conceived of a paradox so elegant, so perfectly structured, that the universe had no choice but to accept it. "The Queen devours everything," Thelmyrus sang through the neural link. "But everything includes herself," Lee continued. "Therefore, she must devour herself to be complete, and a thing that devours itself never existed to begin with." The paradox hit the Queen like a wave of impossibility. For a moment that lasted eternity, she tried to exist while not existing, to devour while being devoured, to be everything while being nothing. Reality chose simplicity. The Queen unraveled, taking with her the war, the consumed systems, and the entire devourer species. The universe decided, retroactively, that they had been a bad idea. In the aftermath, as the fleet returned to normal space, they found the galaxy transformed. 20 star systems blazed with light where there had been empty void. The Kaleth confederacies. Worlds were whole and inhabited again, though the people there remembered the war as a half-forgotten nightmare. Admiral Kim and High Conduit Zara Khan met aboard the New Horizon, both looking exhausted but satisfied. "What happens now?" Zara Khan asked. "Do you return to your dimension?" Kim smiled, looking older but more at peace than when they'd first arrived. "Some of us will. Others want to stay and explore this galaxy with our new friends. The universe is big enough for all of us." Zara Khan nodded, then asked the question that had been bothering her. "Why did you really come? You could have sealed the rift and been safe." "Because," Kim replied after a long pause, "we learned something important during our own darkest days. No one should face the end alone. When someone calls for help across the void, you answer. That's what civilizations do for each other." As the dimensional rift began to close, taking some human ships back while others remained, both species looked forward to a future they would share. The Kaleth would learn human resilience, and the humans would learn Kaleth wisdom. And in the vast emptiness between stars, where the Queen had once hidden, space remained bright and empty, proof that some battles are won not with stronger weapons, but with better ideas about what the universe should be. The war was over. The healing could begin.